Travel and Things presents In Conversation with. I am your host, David Batsoffen, and I'm very pleased to welcome back to In Conversation with my friend and comedy colleague, Al Prodgers, who is also just happens to be the host and presenter and producer of a YouTube channel called Just Off the Highway. Al, a very good morning to you.
Hi, David. Thank you. Good morning to you and to everybody. And thank you for having me back. Normally, it's when I come back a second time, it's only to apologize. Thank you.
Or to return the silverware. So, firstly, a lot
Yes.
of people I know have seen Just Off the Highway. So, before we talk about the program specifically, how did you come up with the idea, firstly? And what does your crew consist of? Do you have thousands like David Attenborough, 87
Oh,
crew,
yes.
all the gear you can want, access to BBC editing facilities, all of the above? None?
Well, if you begin with the idea of crew, it started off in lockdown, where I was stuck at home, and as I'm sure has happened with many people, suddenly in 2020 you had nothing to do, nowhere to go, and there were all those books that you've bought over the years
Yes.
that you've always intended to get around reading, and I started reading them. And I am the kind of person who tends to hang around in secondhand bookshops and grab old books. It's almost like they're like rescue centers they're like the SPCA for books. You know, you
Fair
want to
enough.
take them somewhere safe. And that's what I did. So I had all of these old books, a lot of them either by South African authors, South Africana, whatever you call it. And the more I read, the more I realized how many fascinating, quite small stories we have.
Mm.
Of course, we have the huge cataclysmic events, the Anglo-Boer War, but they're also really wonderful small stories. And I thought a lot of the stuff is getting lost. And that was combined with, I think, quite a rebellious streak, which is if somebody tells me I'm not allowed to travel, that's when I want to travel. That's when I want
Otherwise,
to
it's
go
no
somewhere.
fun.
Yes. Um, and so those two things combined, and as lockdown began to ease and I was able to go places, I decided that I was going to go and travel to some of these places. Started off just me and a cell phone selfie camera, and I was going to make little stories, 5 to 10 minute inserts. Uh, I also coincidentally have an old 1972 Toyota Corona. And I decided that it would be fun to drive to these places at 80 kilometers an hour in my Toyota Corona, and then possibly stop along the way and just re-experience that kind of early 70s vibe when we used to go for a Sunday drive. You know what I mean?
Can I stop you there 1 second?
Yeah.
You talk about 80 kilometers an hour. On a lot of these highways, they are still just off the highway, those cement tables and chairs that
Yes.
as a child, I remember with my parents stopping there in our Ford Taurus station wagon and having hard-boiled eggs and sandwiches.
That's
So
exactly.
maybe that's now that could be a whole insert on are they still around and why are they still there?
They do exist, of course. Nowadays, it's far less safe to stop there
Yeah.
because they are quite targeted spots. But the interview that you and I did recently, I've named that interview Prodgers
Right.
because you remember you used to stop at those places
Mm,
with the little cement tables and you used to have Prodgers. And
correct.
because we were a very fancy family,
Excuse me.
we were very fancy. You had your chicken leg, but you had a little bit of silver paper, a little bit of
Yes.
what do you call it? You know what I mean? That
Tinfoil.
baking paper, tinfoil.
Tinfoil.
You had a little bit of tinfoil around the bottom so that Dad didn't get his fingers greasy or something. You know, it was just and that's the kind of thing that I missed. And so I started traveling around. At first, a few trips. like the one I did to Bloemfontein about J.R.R. Tolkien. They
Mm.
coincided with a corporate comedy gig that I had to do, and off I went, did it all with a selfie. And then I met this madman called Corné Engelbrecht, whose company is Idea Saints, and Corné is he's a camera operator, he's an editor, and he has this passion for South African stories as well. So the two of us started collaborating, and now the crew, as you say, is a crew of one. In other words, it's
It's
no,
him.
yeah. Well, I suppose if you count me, so it's kind of one take L and his two-man crew. That's us, and off we go. I drag him around to places where he generally feels fairly unsafe, like standing on a street corner in Springs with a lot of very expensive camera equipment, while people look at us in a slightly hostile way, and he has to do the shots, and I just figure out how to tell the story.
You seem to limit your stories. Well, maybe limit's the wrong word. You've contained the content of your stories to sort of Gauteng. You just talked about Bloemfontein, but that was a corporate gig that you just tied in with. I know you've been down to KZN, but that tied in with a holiday. Would you think of going somewhere further afield, like Lanesburg? If you remember, they had those horrific floods, and
Yes.
there must still be stories of people who survived, buildings that are no longer there or partially there. That must those sort of stories. Are you keen to share those with your
Oh,
viewership?
absolutely. I would go anywhere. In fact, I have a whole pile of stories about other parts of South Africa, um, that I would love to get to. It's purely a question of budget.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't, as you and I have discussed, how much it costs to make little things like this. I don't have budget, so I do what I can fit it in between other bits
Mm,
of work. But
yeah.
yes, of course. I mean, there are often people who say, "Oh, Cape Town has this wonderful story and this wonderful location." Of course, I'd love to go there. It's simply not practical. But
Yeah.
there's another wonderful offshoot of that, a spin-off of that, which is that we we tend to think of the beautiful parts of our country like Cape Town,
Mm,
like Kruger, KZN, and we forget about the fascinating little stories that are very close to us.
yeah. You and I have
The one with,
discussed this at length about small town South Africa and how it's
yes,
vanishing because of the N highways and people who are so focused on getting to their destinations that they don't want to take an hour or two and just stop and experience a whole new or different destination to one that they are going to.
yep, there's that old philosophy of the holiday starts before you get to your destination.
Yeah.
And it is a really, it's such a fantastic experience. I've been to Zastron, which is, if you're headed towards the Eastern Cape, you go
Yeah.
around the bottom, the southern end of Lesotho. Stop in Zastron for an evening. You see sky like you have never experienced in your life if you live in a city. The sky is huge. The stars are magnificent. The weather's pretty good. The mountains are spectacular. I'm a little bit in love with the Free State. Quite
Okay.
honestly, there are all the old jokes, and as someone who grew up in Cape Town, lives in Johannesburg, I have made lots of cheap jokes about the Free State. Free State people know something we don't. They know how special that part of the
Yeah.
country is.
It's not called Big Sky Country for nothing.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. The stories, how many stories do you have on your YouTube channel currently?
So far, so far we're up to episode number 33.
Right.
And and then I have some other episodes which are for members only, for my members and supporters, who contribute a bit of money on
Mm.
buymeacoffee.com/lprodgers. Note the segue into that plug for myself.
And not the way that I let you.
So what I do is I make some bonus content for them as well.
Okay. When you say bonus, give those who aren't subscribers just a little teaser as to what they can get if they do buy you a coffee slash our produce.
Right. So there are wonderful one story which I told on the bonus material is the story of the big white stone horse in Bloemfontein up on Naval Hill.
Oh, okay.
Now, there is this giant stone horse which was created during the Anglo-Boer War by, I think, the Wiltshire Regiment, because they were stationed at Bloemfontein as a remount unit. The Anglo-Boer War went through over 300,000 horses just on the English side. 300,000 horses dead.
Wow.
They were constantly having to refit and remount. So in order to draw attention to where you could get fresh horses, the Wiltshire Regiment put this stone horse up on Naval Hill, and it's still there, and it's still maintained as a national monument.
Wow, okay.
Now, there's a legend of the stone horse.
That says,
The legend goes like this. Because Naval Hill is a famous, the top of Naval Hill is a famous sort of lovers sneak away for a little canoodle
ah,
spot. And the legend goes that on a particular night, if ever any couple do the dance of horizontal happiness on Naval Hill, then that stone horse will take one step forward. Now, of course, the people of Bloemfontein are incredibly good, decent people. So the horse is still up there.
yeah.
But no one can ever explain why on a Friday night when the moon is just right, distantly you can hear a sound like a horse galloping down a hill.
Much like the monument in Grahamstown, except the monument doesn't move.
And I was genuinely told that story. I was actually told that story by someone from Bloemfontein who now lives in Zambia.
Wow.
And there are these stories everywhere. And I think that's the joy of the experience for me, has been this personal discovery
Yeah.
that we have hilarious people. We know this. Individual stories that you will pick up having coffee in a small town very close to Johannesburg, like Heidelberg,
Mm.
or you go just out of any big city and you will meet people who are hilarious, interesting, friendly, and will tell you fantastic stories.
You talk about just outside big cities. You mentioned Heidelberg. I've only been
Mm-hmm.
to Heidelberg, and I've been in Gauteng for about 45 years. I've only been to Heidelberg once, and that was by accident. I took a wrong turn off and ended up going through the town, and I couldn't wait to do a U-turn and get out. But that was long ago, and when I was a different me. So had it been now, I probably would have found a coffee shop, pulled over, and had a coffee and a gesels with some of the locals, as I tend to do. It's like if you go to Paris, in the center of Paris is the nicest restaurant that serves the
Yep.
biggest rusks and all the old school sweets you can remember when you were growing up. Wilson's toffees, marshmallow fish, marshmallow mice with licorice tails. I would hop in my car now and drive to Paris for those things once more. And then, of course, they have the best burgers on the planet there and the nicest people. They really and
They,
truly are. And I
that's
think,
exactly.
yeah, I think you found this as well, Al. These places and these stories that you tell, the people that you meet, specifically in small towns, they want to talk, they want to share, they want to tell you the legend of the white horse and any other legend that comes along. And if there's white horse involved in the legend of the white horse, so much the better, you know. It's that sort of thing. It's Brandewyn and Cook Sisters around an open fire, basically. And that's what you're
Absolutely.
doing with Just Off the Highway. The slide that I used when we started off our chat, the longest shot, was about a shooting at, I think, Ellis Park, if I remember correctly, which was
Yes.
the weirdest story. I think it made headlines back in the days, but then, like everything else that tiny, it tends to vanish in the eons of time. and everybody knows somebody who knew somebody who thought they knew somebody who sold the gun to a friend of the guy who used it, and then gave it away, type of thing. But it's a wonderful story, and all your stories really and truly are. And people who haven't gone to your YouTube channel are seriously losing out in this type of thing. And I think these stories, from a South African history point of view, are very important and should be savored and revered in a way for the additional layer that it adds to your storytelling.
Thanks, David. Thank you. That's very, very kind of you to say that. The fascinating thing is that when I'd posted that, there was someone who commented who claimed to have been the arresting officer.
You see what I mean?
Some very interesting details. And then I was contacted by someone who still works at the police forensic department.
Okay.
Who said that there's much more detail at the Police Forensics Museum. Unfortunately, I didn't know that before I told the story. And secondly, how do you go about getting permission to go to the police forensics?
I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Exactly. And then my vet, the vet where I take my pets, he bought his first X-ray machine when he was a young vet starting out. He bought a second X-ray machine and that X-ray machine had been reconditioned by the person who worked out the forensics and worked out the trajectory of the bullet.
If only you'd known all of that before you started the story.
Exactly. And that people are fascinating. They sit, or we move around them every day, and they have astonishing, in-depth, wonderful stories.
But you know what I think
sorry to
after you.
I think that if anything, look, I love doing Just Off the Highway, but if anything, what I'd like to do is to create a space where people feel like, once again, that those stories are worth preserving and retelling. I think a lot of people feel like they're ordinary, but they're not. Nobody's ordinary. Everybody's got these wonderful, mad stories that are just fascinating.
And we're all interconnected. We don't realize it because more often than not, we don't talk to anybody. That's why I enjoy bush holidays, because you all have the same experience. And within 10 minutes of climbing onto a vehicle, you realize that this one knows that one, and this one's been there, and they had the same guide as you. And all of a sudden, you've got new friends. Sometimes, as happened with me in Botswana 26 years ago, the people that I met there, we're still in contact with them. We've been out with them to the bush on 2 or 3 occasions. They come all the way from America to come to the bush in South Africa. And it's that type of connection that you need, that one needs, I think, specifically post-pandemic, when everybody became so insular and is now trying to break out of that, and get some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, semblance of normalcy back.
I agree. I think that if I have an image for what I'm hoping to achieve, the town child, the famous
I do.
town. Now, that is a place where I would really like to go and to do a story there. But the town child for me symbolizes something. It's the first fossil that we have of a creature that walked on 2 legs, a creature that got off from its hind legs and got up and looked around.
And went, hey, it's a much better view from up here.
Exactly. Unfortunately, it didn't look around quite enough because an eagle came and took it.
The eagle came down and said, I've been waiting millennia for this to happen. I've been practicing this snatch and grab for thousands of years.
That's the origin of the clan MacDonald, because that creature was just takeaways.
You're gone.
But I fancy that, wouldn't it be great if we all just looked up from our devices for a change, stood up and looked around us and there would be something fascinating. You know that beautiful game reserve where you were recently, where you almost stood on the crocodile?
Yes.
Okay, that now that's a good. It's good that you were actually looking down at that point. I was I was there for a corporate comedy event a while ago, and there was a couple from Europe, young, lovely, friendly, wonderful people. And when we were sitting in the restaurant on the deck overlooking the waterhole, for me, it was such a privilege because I can't afford normally to go there.
Yeah.
And yet they were sitting looking at their cell phones.
I've never understood that.
They were sitting in paradise looking at their cell phones, possibly looking at the photos they'd taken that day. But I got so sad from that.
Yeah.
It's
I hear what
what a
you're
missed
saying.
opportunity.
We are immersed in those devices constantly, all the time, death scrolling for no apparent reason. And at the end of the day, you just want to walk over and go, do you mind if I keep these for 5 minutes? And just look around you. And then when you've looked around you, maybe you won't want the devices back until you go to bed and it's too dark to see anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a break from getting upset with people we'll never meet.
Now we've spoken, you and I, about your YouTube channel, Just Off the Highway, and what it involves, but we don't know much about you, our Prodgers. So
Yes.
I've put together a little questionnaire.
Well,
The
I reserve
idea,
the right not to answer.
you didn't see this coming. The idea, I have to say, I borrowed from Stephen Colbert's Colbert questionnaire, although with all due deference to Mr. Colbert, the questions are not the same and they're less of mine than there are of his.
Right.
But I think the idea is there. So to quote him, our Prodgers, are you ready to be known?
I will do my best. I'll probably lie.
That's fine because neither myself nor the viewers will be any the wiser as long as you do it with enthusiasm and gusto. So
Yes.
here we go. Question one. Your favorite superhero?
I am allergic to superheroes. I don't watch those superhero movies. I'll tell you why I'm allergic to superheroes is because they are I don't to me people the most heroic people are the people who get through life without superpowers.
So you mean
It would
basically not all superheroes wear capes?
Yes. So if it's much more difficult to get through traffic if you can't fly. But if you would press me on a superhero, wow. Okay, it would it. No, you struggling with that one. Struggling with that one. Let me come back to that one.
Let's do it like the quizzes. You say pass, and we'll come back to that if we have time.
Pass.
Fair enough. Favorite place in the world?
I think the most beautiful place I've ever been is in Spain. It's actually in the Basque area, and it's a place called San Sebastian or Donostia, whether you're a Basque or Spaniard. I washed up there once. I actually hitchhiked from France into Spain, and I was given a lift by a wonderful two people, a mother and her son, who were Basque, and they were playing. I was in the back of a Fiat Uno with my backpack, so there wasn't much space, and they were playing Basque music, which, with apologies to all the people from the Basque region who are perhaps watching this, there is a reason why Basque music has never made it to the top of the international
or to the Eurovision Song Competition, for that matter.
It was a very but stuck in the back of a Fiat Uno for hours hearing Basque music was very difficult. Anyway, I ended up in San Sebastian on this beach in this bay, and I for the first time in my life, said, "This is the most beautiful place I've ever seen." That that's the place.
So that almost segues into my next question, which is what is
Mhm.
the most adventurous thing you've ever done? Traveling in the back of a Fiat Uno with Basque music, does that rate on the list?
Getting married. That was
No.
probably having children. Those were
Okay.
the longest running and most rewarding adventures. But oh, I've done silly things in my life. Yes.
Fair enough. That's for another day and another show. The ubiquitous one is, of course, if you could meet one famous person, dead or alive, who would that be?
I would have to be boring because I'm reading a book of Churchill quotes. And although he is desperately unfashionable, um, I think Churchill was this flawed, magnificent lion, and I would have loved to have just been in his presence. And wow, what a storyteller as well.
Indeed.
Um, go ahead.
Now, I had a question, but you've sort of messed it up for me because the first question was favorite superhero. And
Mm-hmm.
the other question, well, I'll ask it anyway because you may have an answer, is if you had a superpower,
Mm.
what would you want it to be? You see, I'll help you along on this one. My superpower, the one I wish I had, is that I could understand every known language on the planet. I don't have to speak it. I just want to be able to understand it because then I know what's going on around me constantly.
That's that's fascinating. I think that recently I also saw a quote, and it might have been Churchill because that's the book I've been reading. But there was a quote which said, "The limits of your language are the limits of your world."
Mm,
And if you could understand other people, idiomatically understand them, you would have almost no limit to your world. So that would be fantastic. Yes, I can buy into that. For me, a superpower, I think immediately the one that jumps to my mind would be time travel.
okay.
And I have to say, forwards would be nice, but backwards would be just as fantastic. To be able to travel to those marvelous events, and sometimes just to be able to travel back 3 minutes in time to think of a superhero. I would, you know, to redo that question and do it correctly.
Something we don't know about you that might surprise us?
Mm. Um, there's probably a reason you don't know it. I probably kept it hidden. Um, I something I. Oh, you're catching me out with these. I used to. I love horses. I really do.
Okay.
Um, I I'm crazy. If I had lots of money,
Mm,
um, there would be horses.
okay. Do you ride just as a matter of interest?
I can.
Okay.
I did ride as a child and as a teenager, and again, one of those things which when you have to pay your own bills, you can't do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I miss horses in my life. Yeah.
Fair enough. And finally, what are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of I definitely my kids, my children. I see them meeting the world with courage and love and an open heart, and I look at them and I am incredibly proud of them. I'm also really proud, I think, of people who who do meet the world without superpowers. Um, I see such acts of kindness around me. People who don't have much who help other people.
Yeah.
That really that kind of that moves me to tears sometimes. You just um, see people who are humble um, and who are open to the world. I think one of the things that that I fear for is that, again, talking about children, is that it's so easy for kids to get closed off, to get cynical, to get jaded. And I think when we get older, we begin to appreciate people who, even though they've been maybe beaten up a little bit, can still meet the world with an open heart. I'm very proud of.
Wonderful. Al,
Does it?
thank you so much. Thank you for sharing yourself with us. It's been most illuminating. Before I let you go, because we're running out of time, details
Yes.
for Just Off the Highway. How do people find it? Where do they find it? And more importantly, how can they subscribe and buy you a coffee? Slash Al Prodgers.
Well, thanks for the interview, David. Thanks for the discussion, and thank you for the interview that you did with me on Just Off the Highway recently. Um, I Just Off the Highway you can find on YouTube.
Right.
You can look up either Al Prodgers or Just Off the Highway. Boom, it comes up. There are 33 episodes. If you click like and if you subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything. And if you do want to contribute, you can contribute a one-off contribution, or you can become a member. It's as little as $2, which is less than a cup of coffee, which you would buy in a restaurant. There we go. And that's on buymeacoffee.com/lprodgers.
When
And
does when does the next episode air?
at the moment, I'm hoping to post the next episode at the end of this week, around Friday.
Okay, so that's Friday. What is the date?
Is
11th, 12th. Yeah, it's Friday the 12th of May.
okay.
Al, once again, thank you so very much for taking time out to chat to me. My guest today here on In Conversation With has been Al Prodgers. He's the presenter, producer, marketing director of Just Off the Highway. If you don't know what it's all about, go and look it up on YouTube, and you will be as amazed and as interested as I have been. Al, once again, thanks for the chat. Thanks for your time. And more importantly, thanks for Just Off the Highway.
Thanks very much, David. Thanks for your support and your interest and all the tips and advice that you've given me as well. Thank you.